Hi, everyone. Welcome. Just going to give everyone a couple of minutes to get signed in here, and then we will get started. But please feel free to join us in the chat and let us know where you are zooming in from today. And I am going to just drop into the chat a link to the book, um, which you can order on our website for pickup or for shipping, whichever you like. And Alexandra was kind enough to send book plates to us. So we have signed copies available, which is really fun. So I'm just going to pop that link here into the chat. Okay, so you should be able to see that. Great. Just going to give one more minute or two for people to get logged on, and then we'll get started. All right. Well, thank you everyone who's joining us today from wherever you are. I know somebody's joining from Queen Anne. Hello. Welcome. Thanks for being here with us. We are very excited to virtually welcome Aleksandra Crapanzano to celebrate CHOCOLAT today, and it was just published this week. Really, really beautiful book. I always have trouble getting it to show up on the green screen, but we will try. Here we go. Very beautiful book, illustrated, which is such a fun treat these days. I love a good photograph, but illustrated cookbooks just feel like a very thing of the past in a way that I miss. So it's really beautiful to see all these drawings. And of course, Alexandra's previous book, Gâteau, which some of you may have, was also illustrated. So it's a really fun style and beautiful book that I hope you all get to enjoy. So we are very excited to hear Alexandra chat about it with Jackie Varriano from the Seattle Times. So I'm going to cue them on in just a moment, but if you have any questions at any point, just pop them right here in the chat. And then we also have a Q&A button as well. So whichever you would like to use, you're welcome. We will get to your questions after Jackie and Alexandra chat for a while. So I am going to turn it over to them if they would like to join me.
Hi.
Hi. Right, I'm like, I don't have a green screen, so this will be easier to hold up maybe. Um, okay, I want to know, because your first book or the other book, Gateau, was also illustrated, what was the decision process between going into illustration again versus you think chocolate, you think photographs? Was
Great,
illustration the only way for you?
great question. Two reasons. One is when I started this book, I called Dora Greenspan and told her I was doing this, and she said to me, "Just be really careful because chocolate is brown, and if you try and do a hundred
All
and
brown? Yeah.
photographs that are all brown, as much as as much as people love to look at chocolate and people love to look at chocolate, they don't want to look at 150 pages of it." So that was one thing. And then it's part of a series. So it's my fourth book, but it's the second in the series that started with Gâteau. I'm going to do tarts, galettes, and quiche next. And that'll be a kind of a series of three. And the real reason for illustrating also was that I just feel the whole purpose of these books is to kind of to demystify certain aspects of French cooking and baking and just show how in fact incredibly easy it is, and that the French, when they cook at home, they really cook classics, they cook simply, they cook the tried and true recipes.
Mhm.
And I didn't want my readers to look at a photograph of a kind of perfect souffle and feel like if
It
there's
could, yeah.
perfect, that that it was a failure, because it's not. Nothing should look perfect. And
No.
no. and the charm, so I wanted to infuse it with a little bit of charm and whimsy and fun, and the illustrations aren't perfect either, which is kind of part of it. They're meant to just show a little bit of more actually about Paris than
Yeah. Well,
really.
and I think it allows readers to have a little bit more ownership over a book, right? Because you're not aspiring to this one perfect photograph. It's all about the end result and how you are. It's kind of like the chocolate piano, um, that's in your intro. It wasn't about the piano, it was about so much more, which is what a great cookbook can do.
I agree. And also, photographs age really fast in cookbooks. Food photography really, really ages.
Hmm.
And sometimes I thought, uh, if Julia Child had photographed those books,
Oh,
would they have,
the
would they,
staying power.
it would have had to have been rephotographed every 2 or 3 years
Hmm.
in order to stay contemporary. Whereas
Yeah.
I feel like the illustrations in it that are just, black and white sketches, uh,
Hmm.
are timeless.
I do want to answer. There's one quick question. What's the name of the illustrator?
Cassandra Montoreal. She's wonderful. She's a Parisian artist, and I found her through a friend, and we have a great time together.
That's amazing.
It-
It's great when it's such a good relationship.
yeah,
Um, okay, well, the book is also, there's a lot of history in this book. How exciting was it to delve into the world, like, of chocolate and French chocolate, especially? Because you even mentioned that, like, Francis does not necessarily make the best chocolate, but they are responsible for so many people's relationships with chocolate. How was it diving into that history?
I love history and I love research. I did a lot of research in college and graduate school, and it's impossible for me not to. The history though of chocolate in France is it's so juicy because it's all about seduction. It's all about royalty. It is all
Mhm.
so I kind of I trace it back, and there's an incredible history to chocolate, and I am not an expert outside of France on the history of it, so I do not go back to the Mayans. But what I do is in the introduction is I go back to King Louis the 13th, who, when he was the Dauphin at the age of 14, ends up meeting his bride, Anne she becomes Queen Anne, but Anne, who is 13. So you have these two teenagers who are suddenly meeting for the first time and getting married and incredibly awkward and just, barely in puberty. And
Yeah.
thankfully, Anne has come with a trunk full of chocolate because the Spaniards had chocolate at the time. And
Mhm.
I will say it kind of broke the ice. I mean, the Dauphin who became Louis the 13th decided, maybe not his bride right away, but he definitely loved the chocolate. And
Yeah.
and it really became something that entered the French court. And then King Louis the 14th had, I mean, incredible banquets of, one of them was, I think, 101 courses, of which,
Mm.
20 were probably dessert.
Yeah.
And chocolate was an absolute thing then. And later on, he ended up falling in love with a young puritanical beauty who abolished chocolate from Versailles, which was a terrible thing to do, right?
Terrible thing.
And so it started a whole black market in chocolate. And the reason really was that people did believe that chocolate was an absolute aphrodisiac. And so everybody wanted their hands on it. And then I won't spend too much time on the history, but it is fun because it's Louis the 15th then. So it's all the King Louis. Louis the 15th then had a mistress, French king, and he used to insist on preparing his hot chocolate and her hot chocolate alone together in private chambers. And what makes it totally extraordinary is that kings didn't do anything. I mean, they barely
Yeah.
without somebody lifting them. If they had to blow their nose, somebody would magically appear with a Kleenex,
Hmm.
and handkerchief. But he banished the entire staff and went into these private chambers with Madame de Matignon, and he would prepare the hot chocolate with a ratio of, you know, equal measures chocolate and water. So very, very rich. And
Hmm.
stir it until it melted, and then he would add one egg yolk to thicken it. And it was unsweetened at the time, and it was
Which is
absolutely
wild.
addictive to sex. So it became this kind of mystique around the court. And then I promise the last Louis I'll talk about was was married to Marie Antoinette, who, we all regard as being frivolous and all of that. And she was in certain ways and she was not in other ways, but she did really love sweets. And she used to get these terrible headaches, which were probably hangovers. And her doctor, I mean, I love this story. Her pharmacist, sorry, was a man named Dubove, and he used to bring her the kind of equivalent of the time of Tylenol. And she would always kind of take it and pucker her lips and hated the taste. So he thought, you know what, let me just wrap it in a little bit of mushed up chocolate with a little bit of mushed up almond milk and a little bit of mushed up orange blossom water and cocoa and give it to her that way. And she, of course, loved it and said, you know what, skip the medicine. I just want that little
Yeah.
candy. And that really did become the first chocolate confection, the first time that
Mhm.
somebody actually, would make solid edible chocolates like
Yeah.
that. Wait, it's a great
Yeah.
history.
It true. I mean, I'm like, can I get my husband to make me a hot chocolate from scratch every day? Like, I can barely get him to make me a coffee in the morning,
I'd
let
love.
alone like banish the family to make this whole ritual. It's amazing. Um,
They had kings and queens had a lot of people doing the stuff that we do.
yeah,
They
on like a
really put
daily.
time for the
Yeah.
for the fun stuff. But the other part of the history I love is that it really, the Vatican would go back and forth over the centuries, on whether chocolate was the stuff of the devil or holy.
Yeah.
And so it was just the history of it was utterly fascinating to me.
Oh, you have a line in there that talks about how they were trying to ban it while at the same time consuming and ordering huge
Yeah,
amounts of it. So it's like they couldn't even say no to
yeah.
chocolate.
The records of the amount of chocolate that the Vatican ordered for its
Hmm.
consumption is extraordinary, even as they banished it. And all of those records are there.
Yeah, which
Total.
is so cool, right? But then it makes me think, okay, are you spoiled for chocolate? Did you ever have a Hershey bar is my favorite chocolate phase, like so many of us did when we were young?
Um,
Did you go straight Valrhona?
I mean, I didn't eat a lot of candy as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I love chocolate. As soon as I moved to Paris when I was 10, just turning 11.
Okay.
And and so my real associations, besides the chocolate piano, which I talk about in the book, which where I was 8 and in Switzerland, really
Mhm.
are associated with really good French chocolate. And
Yeah.
um and that was very lucky. I used to love in America the score bars though, the thin
Oh
one.
yeah, those are great.
Great. Those were great. But
Mhm.
but no, I didn't go through a total candy phase, I will say. But as soon as I got to Paris, I became completely obsessed with chocolate. And it's
Um, how soon after you finished Gâteau did you know you were going to turn to chocolate next?
I knew almost before I finished it. In fact,
Really?
I knew even before I started that I wanted to do a series, and I was kind of deciding which one to do first. And what
Hmm.
I did I started it in the pandemic. And so I was also limited by ingredients. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to definitely do ghetto first. It's going to be much harder to source all of the things to source Valrhona, even to source chocolate.
Yeah.
Um, and I started that book thinking it was going to be a really small book, that it was the pandemic, and maybe the pandemic would last a month or two, and I would make a cake a day and end up with at most, you know, 45 cakes and do just a little book that you get, at the
Yeah.
checkout. And, you know, by day 250 of the pandemic, I had made 250 cakes.
Wow.
Realized that at that point it became a mission to really do something a little bit more definitive, not have it feel definitive in any way, but to really research the classics and include them and not basically leave no stone unturned and really decide what was fantastic. But
Mhm.
not to how can I say this? It really did become a mission in that book to find the classics in a different way. With chocolat, it's you know, chocolate came into the world later. Some of the recipes in gâteau go back to the 12th century and they've just lasted because they're incredibly good recipes.
Mhm.
Obviously, chocolate came later. It was expensive. It didn't become something that was kind of mass produced until much later. By later, I mean, you know, still 150, 200 years ago. But it was less historical research in the recipes, historical research about chocolate, but really then it was about
Mhm.
recipes. And it was super fun.
Oh, it would have, I mean, I just think that Instagram and TikTok have changed the world in so many ways, but the fact that we can see some of these French chocolatiers do amazing things and make us want to go and visit these places. If the research, and you talk a lot in the book about going to see some of them and seeing on hand how they put things together, how they are I mean, it's amazing. It's like Willy Wonka. What was that like? And the differences because they're not as historical. They're very modern, but yet classic feeling recipes for sure.
Yes. So the okay. Obviously I'm a huge Alain Ducasse fan, right? And he is, I mean, he is a master of chocolate. So I met him and I told him what I was doing and he invited me to his what he calls his manufactory. And it's in Paris. It's in a, you know, it's not in a fancy neighborhood, it's in a trendy neighborhood and it is an incredible place. Everybody should go. It's right north of the Bastille. And and he really he did that. He's opened it in 2013. Now the
Okay.
Parisians have always loved chocolate. I mean, you cannot walk 2 blocks without hitting an incredible chocolate shop. But what Ducasse did was he really brought the process of bean to bar into the world, into the public awareness. And
Yeah,
he hates that expression, by the way, bean to bar. He
I'm sure.
he believes that you cook chocolate, you go around the world and you source it and then you cook it because it's not something that you make. And but one of the things before I get to actually seeing what he did, one of the things that I love about what he did is he really focused on fair trade. He really
Hmm.
focused on sustainability and you know, and he did what we all know and you know, the French have known for centuries, but all industries forgot for many, many decades, which is you have to invest in farmers, not just for, you know, one cycle, but for years. And if you do that and they have the confidence of being able to sell their beans to you the following year, then they can invest in the land, in
Yeah,
machinery, in making the decisions that are good for the world and good for the chocolate and good for Ducasse. So it really did illuminate that process in an incredibly important way that I think has had a huge influence. I mean, even Varriano became a B Corp. So enormously. But what he does in his manufactory is he will examine kind of the like a sommelier or actually a vintner, the characteristics of each single origin kind of vintage of cacao beans and figure out what temperature he wants to roast them in for how
hmm,
long, what the process is in every step of extraction, so that you get to that pure chocolate kind of liquor or paste, which then goes into the chocolate making, the actual kind of chocolate bar making. And it was really fascinating to see that just the attention to detail and then to really understand that certain ones had a fruity profile and certain ones had a nutty profile or a buttery
hmm,
profile, caramelized profile, or even a coffee profile. And even though this book is incredibly simple, the difference between making a chocolate cake with with one version of chocolate and another is, is evident. It's fun.
Yeah.
It, it's a way to play with a recipe too. So I definitely went down a deep dive into kind of sommeliers of chocolate world. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you have to, um, was it difficult to also kind of recommend one chocolate brand across the board, right? Because you're getting so many different things from different kinds of flavors depending on where the chocolate is grown, how it's, I don't know, combined with different sugar levels. Did it take you a while to land on Valrhona as your preferred, kind of across the board?
It did not. I really
Really?
think no, it's fantastic. And and I also it is expensive, but what I wanted to encourage was the idea that you can just buy a 3 pound bag,
Yeah.
buy it in bulk. It comes in little kind of coins, so you don't even need to
Hmm.
shop it, which I love.
Yeah.
So, getting a bar at the supermarket and having to whack it on the counter until it breaks into pieces. And at least that's my approach. I guess a knife is is a better approach. But once you have that, once you have really good chocolate and you have bought it in bulk and you store it in a dark cupboard for,
Mhm.
a year, 18 months, it does become much more affordable, and it also just it becomes a pantry staple. And then you know that if somebody is coming to dinner last minute, you can truly whip something up in 10 minutes. It's really good. But I will say I wanted to have one uniform just to make sure that everybody would end up with results they were happy with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Test, all King Arthur flour, Land O'Lakes butter, unless I call for European butter, you know,
Hmm.
what the Valrhona percentage was. Obviously, a different bittersweet chocolate or a different milk chocolate is fine, but I
Hmm.
did, I did want to give that unified um, technique, I guess.
Yeah. I think that is helpful for people, especially they like to be told what to do, sometimes in a cookbook on certain
Yeah.
things.
I mean, and it's different. I mean, the darker the chocolate, right? The difference in texture. I mean, and dark chocolate is incredibly healthy, and it's
Hmm.
healthy after 70% easily. But for people who use 90% cacao, if they try and make a mousse with that, it'll just crack.
Okay, well, we need to talk about mousse because I think are there nine mousse recipes? Was it like asking to choose your favorite child? Like, did you have to fight your editor to be like, we need all nine of these actually, because they all serve a different purpose?
I think I turned it in before asking, which is generally a good
Yeah.
policy. It's just do it and give it in. When I was pregnant, and chocolate mousse is my favorite. So I wanted to have a chocolate mousse without any eggs, any raw.
Hmm.
So I had already gone into that direction, and then I had written about the idea of in the Wall Street Journal about a food processor chocolate mousse. So I started playing with that as a very easy one. But then in Paris, I mean, mousse is such a thing, right? And when I was growing up, there was a street, the Rue du Bac, near me that had I don't even know what I think they call it a bar, but it's a great chocolate shop. But there was a front window that looks like an ice cream little parlor, and you get your mousse on a cone.
Oh.
And you can go and you can choose whether you want, 55% cacao or 60% or whatever. It's in a paper cone, but I actually like it in an ice cream cone. But it's just such a fun way to serve mousse. And that I loved that recipe. And then there's a really wonderful recipe for a very light chocolate mousse. It's made entirely with egg whites
Hmm.
that and you make it and you think this is a disaster. You've got warm chocolate and all of these, that's heavy, and these egg whites that are beaten and fragile, and is it going to work? And it absolutely works. And it's so light that when you take a bite of it, it just kind of vanishes, but you're left with a chocolate flavor. You're left with this incredible, intense experience of chocolate. I love the Hervé Tis, which is kind of a cult classic among foodies, which is a recipe that is just chocolate and water. And He's a French chemist. It works. Uh, it's actually a healthy recipe.
Mm-hmm.
Rich. I couldn't resist including that one. Then I wanted one that was sweeter for people who have a super sweet tooth. Then I wanted, I kind of, yeah, they are all really different. It definitely had to be nine different mousse and cremeux was the other discovery that I love.
Mm-hmm.
This is it translates literally as cream, I mean
Okay.
chocolate cream, and it's kind of a combination of let's say a mousse and a pot de crème and a pudding.
Mm-hmm.
It takes no time to make. There are two recipes. One's super simple, the other is just a little bit more complicated because you need a thermometer. But it's just like it is exactly what the name suggests. It's like taking a bite of like creamy, silky chocolate. It's incredible. So I also had to include two of those. And and then a what I call a ganache montée, or what the French call a ganache montée, which is basically just a whipped ganache,
Mm-hmm.
which in a pinch is just a fantastic mousse. And two ingredients, cream and chocolate, unsweetened. You can add a little honey if you want to make it glisten. You can add a little rum, you can add a little coffee, you can add whatever you want to it. It's a very kind of structurally sound, easily adaptable recipe. Takes 10 minutes. So I had to include that too.
Right. You had to.
I had to. I had
There's
to.
no way around it. I mean, that's like when people ask, what's your favorite restaurant? It's like, well, what did I eat yesterday? What neighborhood am I in? Like it's just an impossible, it's always going to change. The answer is,
Yes.
um, just like what mousse should I make for this party? Who knows? Anything is possible.
They're all good. You
They're
can
all
make
good.
make nine.
Um,
But
how
that
did
was
the rest of sorry, what were you gonna, did I interrupt you?
go
Um,
ahead.
were the rest of the chapters as engaging as that Moose chapter, like where you just couldn't stop adding recipes to things?
You know, I had originally thought, am I just going to include one great recipe for hot chocolate
Yeah.
because it sounds simple enough?
Hmm.
Absolutely not. That also, it's not a big chapter, but it is an actual chapter on hot chocolate. And and it's really because the French chocolate makers really love hot chocolate. I mean, hot chocolate is less of a kid's drink in France. It is a kid's drink, but it's also a grown-up drink.
Hmm.
If I go to a museum with friends and we stop at a cafe in the afternoon, some people have hot chocolate, some people have coffee. It's not an exceptional thing. And it's really because the chocolate tends to be rich. It tends to be unsweetened, not necessarily totally unsweetened, but not sugary.
Yeah.
It tends to be a lot less milky. Sometimes it's made with water with just a little bit of milk. But there's so many good recipes and so many interesting additions that I kind of wanted to play with that. Jean-Paul Havin, who's one of the great chocolate makers in France right now, and wrote a book about hot chocolate. He likes to, with a dropper, he will just put a drop of a certain liquid in to people's hot chocolate without telling them what it is, and he won't stir it.
Okay.
And you drink it, and just in one particular sip, you suddenly get this blossom of a different flavor. So
Mhm.
it could be yuzu, it could be orange, it could be, you know, coffee, it could be cassis, it could be any number of things. It could be cherry juice, which I think is also kind of great, or just
Yeah.
chain a raspberry into it or a blackberry. But I kind of loved that idea, so I wanted to include that. And then I love the idea of a boozy hot chocolate at night. So
Hmm.
came with a little Armagnac or a little rum. And oh yeah, no, it was super fun. Those who do a little salt and a whipped cream for it, working with different levels. It was, oh, and one thing that was really interesting in that chapter, which I hadn't known about, is really the technique of starting cold.
Okay.
Most chocolate makers in Paris do start with chocolate as opposed to cocoa. So the idea of just taking chocolate and water in a double boiler and over
Hmm.
just a very gentle heat, stirring it until it is emulsified and a little thicker. But you're starting cold, and then you add a little bit of milk or a little bit of cream, whatever you want to add. But it's a really lovely process because it just thickens it very gently. It's delicious. And you
So
only want
no, yeah,
a cup of that. I mean, it's, you know.
there are no Swiss Miss packets, um,
No,
which is probably for the best. I mean, there are other options for us.
it's not. It's just if you can get away too from the chemicals,
Yeah.
there are two homemade Nutella recipes, one of which takes all of, 10 minutes, and
Hmm.
it's better for you, it's cheaper, it has no chemicals, it actually tastes
Hmm.
like what it is. Um, I don't know, I feel like those things make a difference in the end.
100%. Um, okay, so do you think there's a natural starting point to the book? Because with cookbooks, it's not always the first recipe. It's not always the beginning of the book. Where do you think people should start?
That's a great question. I will say that almost all the recipes are doable without experience,
Mhm.
except for the opera cake.
Which I did. I read through that recipe because I've had an opera cake before, and it's such a beautiful dessert. And I thought, oh, I think I'm going to start with a cookie. I can't do that first. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just has a lot of components. The components,
Hmm.
but that's the one that, and a bûche Noel, once you learn to roll it, is really easy, but the first time is a little daunting. Other than those two, everything is really simple. I mean, going to the simplest, which is an afternoon treat for kids in France, which is to literally make a melt dark chocolate essentially, or milk chocolate, and pour it over a bowl of cornflakes and mix it together with your hands,
Wow. Yeah.
and just kind of drop it on parchment, and it like miraculously will tend to fall into a flower shape on its own, and
Hmm.
you just let it come to room temperature, put it in the fridge for a little bit, and you suddenly have the easiest dessert in the world.
Yeah.
Or the French yogurt cakes are really easy. There's a chocolate one in this. Um, Meringues are easy. The rochers are easy, which are little, they're basically coconut macaroons. Uh,
Hmm.
no, the recipes they're not complicated for the most part. And again, my intention is really to reveal a side of French baking that I don't think is known as well outside of the country, which is what people bake at home.
Hmm.
And part of the reason for this series was I realized there were no books on this subject, amazingly. There was no book on, the cakes that French people make at home. And the
Hmm.
cook at home, and they do bake at home, and they do it simply, and they do it frugally, but they do believe that you should have a little something sweet every day for the most part. And so yes, they go to patisseries and have incredible treats there.
Hmm.
But if they're cooking at home for their family, they will probably take 10 minutes to just make a really easy, wonderful dessert. And that I felt was just a very unknown side. And the reason there are not a lot of French cookbooks on the subject is that those recipes generally have been passed down through generations, or they become back pocket recipes. They're like Toll House cookie recipes.
Yeah, where they feel like, why would anyone write these?
Right.
Everyone knows how to make this.
Why would you make it into a book, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But yes, but I that book won Ghetto won a big award over there because people realized that also the tradition of moving from generation to generation with recipes, of passing them along, is dying. So that
Mhm.
actually those books suddenly do matter. That kind of home cooking matters tremendously.
Yeah, well, it's memories. And if you don't have a written account of it, um, it very easily goes away faster than we think.
Yes.
Um,
And the other thing about the French, which I really love, is that there's obviously there's this whole Instagram world, right? We're seeing that where, people like Cedric Collet, who's in the New York Times today, or Michelak is another one, or there are a bunch of like superstar French bakers who come up with these incredible
Mhm.
confections on a, bi-weekly basis and post on Instagram and have huge followings and these are new inventions and that is its own category. And
Mhm.
but then by and large, people really want, particularly in sweets, they want the things that they've always loved.
Yeah,
It's
completely.
necessarily want what's trending. And
No.
um and that goes back to the reason for the illustrations too, is these recipes shouldn't grow old.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why they're back pocket recipes, right? It's something that you can reliably wow people with that um, is just simple, good food.
Yeah, yeah. And then you get to improvise, which I love. It's you like cardamom, add cardamom, cinnamon, black pepper,
Mhm.
rum, coffee, ginger, pear, raspberry. I mean, it's you chocolate actually goes so well with so many things. There are things like a little bit of Poire William, which will bring out the delicate nature of chocolate, whereas, coffee will bring out a depth of flavor in a different way, and nuts can give it texture, they can give it solidity, they can do so many different things in terms of just, you know, giving a very basic recipe a little tweak like that. So knowing how to make a basic flourless chocolate cake and then deciding one day, I've got a pint of raspberries in the fridge.
Yeah.
Scatter them on the baking pan before you put in the batter, and you have a raspberry chocolate cake. And
Mhm.
I want people to feel comfortable in doing that. I want them to know that they can do that.
So if you were making a cake every day with gâteau, was recipe testing looking a lot similar to that? I mean, were you doing as much playing, like where you were throwing raspberries in or doing things like that with this book?
I did, I really did. And I also I did have I've kind of also have a recipe tester who goes through everything a second time.
Hmm.
Mm, But during the pandemic with, two kids, she was pretty busy too. So I I baked a lot of cake. Let's
Yeah.
just but you can also tell. And
Hmm.
if something works with a certain amount of raspberries, the chances are it will work with a certain number of strawberries, and
Hmm.
kind of how to play with those different flavors. With chocolate, it was a lot of chocolate. I thought I would never want to see chocolate again, and I'm
Yeah.
still having a little bit of chocolate every day
Oh, yeah.
because it's the essential. Yeah.
Um, okay, well, are you not to, I know that you just birthed this baby and it just came out this week, but um, I'm sure you're working on something else already. Do you want to talk about what's next? What in the series?
So I'm gonna do tart scallops and quiche next. And I've signed on to do it. I will do it with the same illustrator, same publisher. And it really, I kind of always knew I wanted to do that. It will be, I mean, Ghetto did have savory recipes as well. Tarts will definitely have a lot of that, especially with the quiche. But I want it again to be a simple, once you have, let's say, feel comfortable with 5 different tart crusts, or even
Yeah.
two tart crusts, right?
Hmm.
Maybe, can buy puff pastry easily in the supermarket in the freezer department. Um, there's a lot that's suddenly open. And to me, it feels like a great way to eat less meat. And it's economical. It's a little lighter often. It doesn't necessarily sound that way when you think about tarts, but it actually is, especially
Hmm.
with thin crust and you make a summer Provençal one with, tomatoes and eggplant and zucchini and onions and thyme and they look beautiful. And I love them for dinner, for lunch. You can keep tart dough in the freezer and it's always there for you, which I appreciate. So that's the next one. But I think I've made 3 recipes for that book so far, and then I'm, launching this. It came out on Tuesday, so I'm kind of full on right.
Yeah, you're still in chocolate.
I'm still totally in chocolate. I really am. And and you know, and it's fun talking to people about chocolate because it's people do get really giddy.
Yeah.
I consulted a lot in the restaurant world, and the thing that I've always heard chefs say is, just never take the chocolate dessert off the menu because there will be a war. It remains the single most popular choice in dessert in
Yeah.
America, hands down.
Hmm.
These recipes are less sweet. This is not a kind of tunnel of fudge book. It's the French do. I think the best way to describe it is that they're really looking flavor forward. So if you're taking a bite of a French chocolate cake, they really want you to taste chocolate before sugar.
Hmm.
Um, and it's, the same way that if you're having an apple cake, they want you to taste apple before, say, vanilla or cinnamon or any of the other things. So it's really the recipes are really very much about showcasing the chocolate and not necessarily going. I mean, they're all the recipes are all sweet, but they're not sweet like you know, a, and I love these too, but like a big American Southern layer cake where
Yeah. Yeah.
and they tend to be like the cakes are very much, with one exception, one layer. Sometimes it has a little glaze on top, sometimes a little dark ganache, sometimes
Hmm.
a of cocoa or powdered sugar. Um, there's a wonderful olive oil and chocolate cake. There's a chocolate nut tort, which I love. Um, those are all super, super simple kind of weeknight desserts. And
Yeah. Which makes me think, who do you, I mean, this cookbook really, I feel like Great British Bake Off makes us feel like Chocolate Week is so, and there's always a disaster. Chocolate is so difficult. But this book really feels like it's very approachable. It's for everyone. If you like chocolate, you'll find something in here for you.
chocolate is really easy to work with in that you have to know two things. You have to know that it doesn't like the cold and it doesn't like the heat.
Hmm.
Yes, you have to bake it, but you unless you're cooking a madeleine at a very high heat, very briefly or something like that, you're cooking everything pretty much, at 350 or under. And
Hmm.
and likewise, you will sometimes put a ganache or a cake into the fridge to help it solidify. But but you don't want to shock chocolate, right? That's the only thing to know about chocolate. Otherwise, it's incredibly easy to work with. I mean,
Hmm.
if you have chocolate and you have eggs and you have a little bit of sugar, you can actually make dessert. I mean, it's or little butter. It's four ingredients, five ingredients, super, super simple. If the
Hmm.
chocolate is good, the result will be good. And and people are so happy when you serve them something chocolate, because it's kind of what everybody really wants.
True. Yeah.
And and to me, there's something about I think baking is the easiest part of cooking
Hmm.
in the way that I do it, right? The Bake Off, British Bake Off, absolutely not. Once you
Yeah.
decorating things, that's a whole other world. I don't think I've ever decorated a cake except to, scroll happy birthday on it.
Hmm.
But I've
Yeah.
I've certainly have never done little flowers and rosettes. I mean, I've not at all. And to me, that's an entirely different approach to baking.
Hmm.
And it's fantastical and wonderful and fun. And you could do that with so many of the recipes in this book if you wanted to get out the pastry bag. Um, but it's not part of the recipe for me.
Yeah.
It's kind of the afterthought.
Well, it looks like we have some really great questions in the chat and also in the Q&A. So, Jackie, if you're able to see those, we can jump in there.
Yeah. Um, well, we do have a gâteau related question from Grant. Um, I loved gâteau, but I still don't know where to find in the US a skinny French loaf pan. Can you help?
Yes, easy. The King Arthur catalog or King Arthur website has them, and Le Creuset makes them, I think.
Mm,
Um, but I think I got mine on the King Arthur site.
that
And
seems easy.
they're
Yeah.
nice too because a loaf cake is it's thick. It's a 9 by 5 is thick, and you can kind of cook it for a lot less time if you're using something that's a little longer and skinnier.
Hmm. Okay, Christina says, can you talk about some of the different approaches to chocolate, adding corn or ash in French Basque country? Are there any recipes in your book?
No. I will say, I mean, that's getting very chefy when you're starting to add ash.
Mm,
I think I mean, I'm sure it's also traditional, but I am very clear on what my knowledge base is, and it is absolutely not that. So I
hmm
fantastic, but no. That is, I mean, French food is very, very regional still.
hmm
Paris is great because so many people come to Paris from every region in France, so that you do get a melting pot of the different regions of cooking. But I did not move outside to the different areas that much.
hmm
Uh,
Which makes me think about one of the Louis. Why was he adding an egg yolk?
oh, to thicken it.
To thicken the hot chocolate. Just, is there an egg yolk in any of your hot chocolate recipes? Or are we
Uh,
just adding egg yolks for thickening?
you can. No, it's great actually. I mean, it was chocolate and water, and I think, it was something that was a thick bracing drink at that point.
Hmm.
It did add, I like thinking of him with a little whisk and his kingly outfit and crown, but
Right? And his
it-
mistress?
in the full Monty, I don't know, but basically it's definitely just gives it a little bit of a rich thickness.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Oh, good.
I am wondering because we have some really like great local chocolatiers here in Seattle, and there's lots of great ones around the country. And if you did end up with a kind of a bar with a fun flavor or some fun mix-ins, what would be a good recipe in the book to kind of experiment a little with using a chocolate that has some extra flavor or some kind of fun extra?
Oh, great question. And then by the way, there is chocolate bark in this book, which I love because it's like the best thing if you've got to bring somebody to somebody, bring a little chocolate to somebody as a gift, or chocolate truffles, by the way, which I always bought, and then I discovered that actually you can just roll some ganache and then roll it in some cocoa or some sparkling sugar, and suddenly you have an incredible truffle, and you don't have to go and spend $50. But for those, you could absolutely do any of the ganaches with that, and it would just add a depth of flavor or different notes of flavor. You could certainly use it in any of the cake recipes, certainly the yogurt cake recipes.
Mm.
Um, Let me just think. You would not want to use it in a mousse. You're not going to want to do it in something that needs a lot of beating if it's got a lot of, pieces in it.
Okay, that makes sense.
But absolutely. And so for chocolate bark, which they call Mondial, and they kind of make them into little pieces, but I love to just put it in a big sheet pan, and then, think of it in threes. And so maybe do kind of pistachios and rose petals and cardamom on one side, and then maybe, candied ginger on another, or candied orange peel, and then just break it into zigzag pieces very casually, and it's
Sounds
really fun.
great.
Mhm.
Add a
And
little
looks
bit
like we have
of
another one last question over here. Is there hope for recipes with vegan chocolate, or can any chocolate without a milk product pass as vegan?
That is a very tough question, and it depends. Does depend on the recipe. So anything that is uh any of the you could definitely do that with a food processor mousse. I wouldn't, for example, try it with the RVT mousse, which really does depend on chocolate as we know it, primarily. But you could use, for the most part, and I think this gets into brand specific, so I don't want to give a blanket answer. But the simpler the recipe, the chances are you can do that. Not for the chocolate sorbet. Um, and what is nice is you could for chocolate, for hot chocolate, if you can use water instead of milk, or you can use oat milk. Um,
Well,
you can,
I'm sufficiently hungry and ready to go make some
I know I made
chocolate
9 of those
truffles,
myself
chocolate bark,
now.
all of these
Yeah.
things. And I think the Nutella recipe that you mentioned, Alexandra, I think that's so exciting. And that's such a kind of easy thing to, because Nutella is like full of palm oil and all these artificial thickeners and all these things. And I like the idea of not having to do that. And we have a lot of great hazelnuts here in the Northwest. So
Mhm.
great, you
maybe
have
that's a weekend project.
in fact, the hazelnuts that I get are from a place not far from you called Freddy's.
Oh, yeah. Oh, great. Yeah.
What I love about them is that they do all the work, which is of taking off the, cracking them
Mhm.
shells, but then also taking off the peel, because that's
Oh, that's amazing.
nobody
That's
wants to
what
do.
takes a lot of
Nobody
time.
wants to do that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much, Jackie and Alexandra, for taking the time. Such a great conversation. I feel like I learned so many things. And thank you everyone for joining us online from wherever you are. And please do check out the book if you get a chance. It's on our website and you can order it for pickup or for shipping. We ship everywhere. And yeah, just such a delightful book that I'm glad we got to dive into together. And I'm looking forward to tarts, quiches, and galettes next. So we'll see you all back here 2 years from now. All right.
Great.
Thank you, everybody. Take care and enjoy the
Thank
rest of
you.
your day. Bye.
Bye.